So it gives me great joy to announce the 2022 Outliving It Award winner, Birdy.
Just taking it all in for a second. If I have learned anything from MS, it's that every single moment counts. So I want to take a moment to just appreciate all of the beautiful people that are in this room, how generous and kind and loving you all are. So thank you so much for being here and for supporting this. Before I begin talking about my story, I wanted to take a moment to dedicate this award and this speech to my grandfather. He also lived with MS. And though he is no longer with us, his life and his journey with MS continues to be my inspiration and my motivation to keep moving forward. Something you should know about me, my first descent's nickname is Birdy. But I'm terrified of birds. I really like the idea of them, but in person they're super scary. I think my fear goes back to an ostrich that I accidentally made eye contact with when I was on a very slow-moving train at a petting zoo. Or a resident pigeon at a wildlife center that every time I went to volunteer would land on my head and peck me. But here I am, with birds tattooed on me and feathers in my hair, because I am learning, thank you. I am learning to love the things that scare me the most. Kind of like being up here, and emotionally right now, I feel like a raw and frayed nerve, which is very similar to what MS has done to parts of my body. So as you just saw, in 2017, I was living the life that I had always imagined. I was married with 2 babies, a dog, a house, quiet neighborhood. I was a career second-grade teacher. I had a retirement plan with summers off, and at that time I had just returned to work after maternity leave. I was in the midst of trying to figure out how to do it all, how to be all of it, a wife, a mother, a teacher, and still find time to be myself. And then I noticed I wasn't able to feel my left foot. I poked at it, I massaged it, I hit it against the floor repeatedly, trying to wake it back up, but nothing worked. I was concerned that I might not ever feel it again, but who has time to worry about those things when you've got all this other stuff to take care of, including a toddler and a newborn whose lives seemed more important than my own. So after that, the next few weeks brought a whole new host of symptoms, a whole new level of clumsiness that I had never experienced before. I was dropping dishes. I was running into door frames, into countertops. I began to misread and mishear things. Driving through the town where I have always lived, I couldn't remember how to get where I was going. All of this was accompanied by constant nausea, hot flashes, flashes, wooziness, migraines that forced me to spend most evenings on the bathroom floor. I lived on peppermints and sour candies and lost about 20 pounds in 3 months. One Saturday morning, I went to play soccer, something I've done my entire life. I thought maybe some exercise would improve my circulation or reset whatever glitch this was in my system that was messing with me. I tired quickly. I felt slow. I just couldn't get up to speed. My legs felt like lead, and I didn't have enough strength to even lock my ankles to kick the ball. It was my first time back on the field postpartum, so I angrily assumed that my conditioning was at an all-time low. And I left the game feeling frustrated. Back at home, my condition did not improve with rest. Distracted by all of the other challenges, I had forgotten about my foot. But the next time I paid attention to it was later that day, when both feet and legs and hands and arms went numb. Panic ensued. What followed was a series of trips to the ER, neurology appointments, MRIs, extensive blood work, and a spinal tap in my doctor's office the very first time that I met her. All of that to receive an official diagnosis. But I distinctly recall the moment that I knew in my heart what this was. I was laying in my daughter's room, listening to her sleep, trying not to panic as I once again Googled my symptoms, which I would not recommend doing. When I read the words multiple sclerosis, I felt a sense of calm and understanding, mixed with the sinking feeling in my gut. That's it. That's it, I told myself. After months of suffering and confusion, it was a relief to finally receive a definite medical answer just a few days later on St. Patrick's Day. I left that appointment having gotten a crash course on how MS works, what types of symptom management medications are available, what a disease-modifying treatment is, and deciding which one I would like to try. When I got home, I dressed my babies in their holiday outfits and had the best day playing with them. It wasn't until late that night, when everyone else was asleep and the house was quiet, that it all sank in. I have MS. That one diagnosis to explain all of the symptoms came with a host of new questions. What is happening? Why is this happening? How can I make it stop? And how is my life going to change? All I could see were the things that I would lose to this disease. My imagination had me rendered immobile, speechless, and blind. A breathing statue in constant, invisible pain. My loved ones would spend their precious time caring for me, while I offered nothing in return. My children would sacrifice their own pursuits for my sake, that I'd be nothing more than a burden. I could find no meaning in a life like that. I had entered a very dark tunnel that seemingly had no end. And just 2 days later, I hosted my son's second birthday, as if nothing had changed. The world continued spinning on, and I did my best just to keep up. The rest of that year was one loss after another. I couldn't play soccer anymore, something I had done my entire life. I could barely walk around the block. I couldn't read without falling asleep. New medications meant the end of breastfeeding way earlier than I had planned. I sought mental health services to cope with this diagnosis, and I ended up with several mood and personality disorder diagnoses to go with it. I had a miscarriage. My dog died. My marriage was failing. I had no time or energy left to socialize. I was still teaching. But the fatigue had gotten to the point that I would come home after a day of teaching, and I would unintentionally fall asleep on the living room floor with my children crawling all over me, prying my eyes open, saying, "Wake up, Mommy," making me feel like an absolute failure as a mom. I was drowning in a sea of physical pain and emotional pain. And I couldn't find the words to explain how it felt to lose all of the things that I had built my identity around. I was silently grieving the loss of abilities, opportunities, relationships, the life that I had imagined. I had no idea who I was anymore. There's so much research and writing on the topic of grief that I could never possibly mention all of it here, but there's one thing that I wanted to talk about that has been the most impactful and influential for me. So in 1969, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross introduced the world to her 5-stage model of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I don't recall much of my grieving process, except that I tried to move toward acceptance as fast as possible. After her passing, Kubler-Ross's co-author and researcher, David Kessler, published a new book titled Finding Meaning: The 6th Stage of Grief. He contends that the grieving process is not linear, is never truly over, and most importantly, we have the choice to take our grief and make it mean something. This is not a silver lining. This is not denying reality or the pain of it. It is a decision to keep moving forward. So after my diagnosis, I began to accept my mortality, a deep understanding that my time on earth is limited. But I was so focused on the letting go of things, being okay with letting go, that I forgot to let things in. I was stuck, standing in place, just waiting for that next storm to blow through. Until I opened my email one day and I read about First Descents. I read the announcement about this organization hosting a pilot program for young adults with MS, and I knew I have to do this. And this is going to change my life. I wasn't wrong. even though I had never been whitewater kayaking before. It sounded like something I would like to do in a place where I would like to be. It was the first time in more than a year that I felt a spark of excitement, anticipation, the call of adventure. I made up my mind to take that trip no matter what. Despite all of the what ifs, I prepared my classroom for the first week of school with a substitute. If you're a teacher, you know what I'm talking about. I hugged my babies extra tight, leaving them for the very first time. And I got on a plane to Montana. I really wondered what I had gotten myself into when I was greeted at the airport by this tall guy wearing an even taller furry blue hat, a Hawaiian shirt, and a hula skirt, and he called himself Rufio. And there was a lovely young woman wearing a onesie of Rainbow Dash who called herself Quickie. And there was no turning back, so I got in the van. With a handful of other participants, we spent the drive choosing the FD names that we would use exclusively for the rest of the week, and that's when I became Birdy. When we arrived at the Tarkio River Lodge, I was greeted with warm hugs and joyful hellos from all of the staff as if I was a long-lost friend that they couldn't wait to see. Those first few hours of meeting and getting to know people were very challenging for me. I was very shy and insecure. So I did what any good introvert does, and I found a jigsaw puzzle. I dove into the puzzle and I listened. I avoided eye contact, but I did interject my thoughts every once in a while. I heard diagnosis stories, thoughts on different medications, and where people were at with symptoms and flares. The conversation then gradually turned away from MS to other lighter things. While taking it all in, I observed something interesting. In this place, in this group, having MS became the least interesting and important thing about me, when in everyday life it is what screams different. We all just want to belong. I found a profound sense of freedom. Being surrounded by others who knew exactly what I was going through let me feel seen, heard, and loved as a whole person. It allowed me to begin owning my diagnosis as one small piece of me. This dynamic of community support continued and transferred perfectly to kayaking. As a group, we were experiencing a new and potentially dangerous activity, feeling excited and petrified and everything in between. But we were all in it together. So in kayaking, one of the very first things that you learn is how to stay calm and get out when your boat flips. This required being flipped over and holding my breath underwater over and over again. By the time I finished, I could not feel my fingers. My legs felt like taffy When it's fresh, it's very flexible. But I felt like taffy that had been in the freezer, that when you try to bend it, it just shatters. But I wasn't the only one. We were all sharing these same symptoms to some degree. After I did my wet exit and had to stand on the beach to get back into my kayak, I was so dizzy and disoriented from all of the flipping that I nearly fell over every single step that I took. I would have hit the ground if it weren't for one of the volunteers who was standing right there to catch me, Mr. Ben Wright. I laughed, embarrassed, but no one else even batted an eye. They looked at me with complete understanding. I relaxed, and I took some breaths, and I allowed other people to empty the water from my boat, and they helped me get back in. I had a very similar experience on the second day after learning about edging, lifting one side of the kayak to basically lean into the turn. So we started practicing the skill, entering and exiting eddies, and I was really enjoying that challenge. I was getting the hang of it, but I got a little too confident. So I caught an edge and I flipped right over. I used what I had learned about exiting my kayak, and within seconds, someone was there to help me get to dry land. Others gathered my gear and brought it all back. It's standing on a rock in the middle of a river, waiting for the water to drain from my boat. I couldn't stop smiling. I was surrounded by the entire group. They were patiently waiting for me to get back in my boat. They weren't going to leave me behind. They had my back, and I felt safe, and I felt supported, even though my worst fear had just come true. In that moment, I understood why having a community is so important. It's not just about having someone to vent to about the struggles that you are going through. It's about knowing in those really difficult moments that you are not alone and that you are receiving empathy and not sympathy. It is also what helps you to believe in yourself again, to find the courage to take risks. Me getting tossed around and flipped over meant that I had taken a risk. Everyone on that program had been challenged without choice by MS. But instead of letting it hold us back and tell us what we can and cannot do, FD gave us an opportunity to let ourselves be vulnerable, to take risks, to choose to face it head on and power through the rapids that are trying to take us down. On the last night of the trip, I found myself sitting on the lawn of the Tarkio River Lodge, looking up at the most beautiful sky I've ever seen. That moment was my turning page. The exact moment that my life changed. I could see clearly that what I had thought was accepting my mortality and making peace with my diagnosis was actually me detaching and disconnecting and numbing. And I suddenly understood that while my pain is not a choice, my suffering is. Warmed by the, thank you. Warmed by the support of this new community, filled by the excitement of adventure, enlightened by my acknowledgement of the truth, my heart cracked open. I felt something. It was so foreign that I didn't even recognize it at first. It was love. Love for life and the opportunity to be here on this earth and experience it. Love that makes pain bearable. Love that made me believe that I could move forward again. And make all of this mean something. Love that showed me that the most brilliant and beautiful part, the most miraculous part of letting go and of surrendering is the space that it creates in our hearts for letting new things in. A space where that fire can move through you and burn brightly once again. Sitting on the softest grass that I have ever felt under that giant pink sky, surrounded by people, I began to shed tears of both sorrow and joy, knowing that I could not return to the life that I had been numbly living for so long. Now that I had felt for the first time what life could truly be, I was no longer just doing what I could to get by. Life became about deciding what I want, fighting with everything that I have to make it a reality, and accepting with grace whatever the outcome may be. In my years since my time in Tarkio, I have dedicated myself to outliving it. As I said at the beginning, I am learning to love the things that scare me the most, because that is where our greatest potential for growth lives. I invited adventure and excitement back into my life, despite the fear. I started singing and dancing in public. Thank you, Rainier. I have traveled, and I have met countless new friends. This supposed introvert just needed to learn who she really was. I have left behind harmful relationships and formed new loving ones. I have found new activities to channel my passion into. I am always learning, adding new tools to my belt that can lead me toward living healthier and a more authentic life. I left my career as an elementary school teacher, and I started a new one as a collector of part-time jobs, like teaching yoga, freelance writing, public speaking, and creating art that speaks to the pain I have felt but no longer choose to carry. I have been building an open and honest relationship with my children, teaching them what I am learning about feeling joy and sorrow at the same time. I went to an enclosure of birds with them, and I allowed them to land all over me. And instead of screaming in fear, I laughed with joy. I am educating my family and friends about MS. What I know, how I've learned to take care of myself, and how I feel. I have found a new disease-modifying treatment that works well for me in Okervis, of all things, so thank you, all of you, for changing my life in other ways. I started telling my story as a way to support and encourage other people who are moving through similar experiences, to let them know they are not alone. I could never tell the story of my life without mentioning First Descents. It was truly what brought me back to life when I needed it most. My heart still burns brightly with passion for the healing power of adventure and the mission of First Descents. I know firsthand the potential that FD has to change countless lives, just as it did for me. My First Descents adventure gave me my answer to the poet Mary Oliver's question, what will you do with this one wild and precious life? My answer, absolutely everything I can. Thank you.
Ooh, child, things are gonna get easier. Ooh, child, things